Like the sleep is an opportunity for the brain to go in and clean things up. And that can't happen while you're awake. And that's a big function of sleep. And that's the same in the gut. When you're going on a fast, whether it's intermittent, shorter one, or it's a longer one, it's this opportunity for the body to actually clean up, because there's not an active job to be done because there's no food to digest. And so the body's actually cleaning things up. It's going into what's called like autophagy. And so it's going in and it's cleaning things up that it would have otherwise like put on the to-do later list, right? Now it's like actively going in and doing the cleaning that it didn't have the time to do previously.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another exciting topic. And today we are going to be talking about the gut microbiome and what impacts fasting has. This has been a hot topic for a very long time. The concepts of how fasting can improve health has increased in attention, mostly because of its potential benefits on gut health, but as well as just overall well-being. And we see this, I know, in impacts on aging, on inflammation, brain function and clarity, as well as overall gut health. And before we get too deep into this, I hope this is you joining us for another exciting topic. If it's not, welcome. And we don't want you to miss anything that we talk about. We are consistently talking about exciting things in the world of gut health and the gut microbiome. And this is a great way to get educated, because you can really improve your health when you start including gut health as part of your targets when looking at improving health. So please subscribe, hit the bell button, put us in your calendar to know that we'll be, releasing another episode, and make sure that you leave comments and questions so that we know where to stop and talk about more on other topics or new topics to jump into.
And share with your friends, share with the doctor. If you're a doctor, share with another doctor or your network of doctors. We're always looking to, try to share the most relevant research relating to the gut health, gut microbiome. And as we know, the gut is the foundation of everything. So this is your one-stop shop to learn about the gut health, gut microbiome. And I'm really excited to talk about fasting today, mostly because I'm a few hours away from finishing up my own 72-hour water fast. So I'm very curious to begin eating again and how I'm going to feel when I do. But yeah, this is a very pertinent topic for a lot of people that have, there's a lot of interest around this topic, and I think fasting can be used in a manner to really support overall health as well as gut health. So I'm excited to jump into this.
So for anyone that doesn't know what fasting is, basically it's abstaining for food for a period of time. And this can range from something like intermittent fasting, which was periods of fasting within a day followed by eating. And this is something that's consistently done. Or you can do something that's like a prolonged fast, similar to what Jason talked about, like a water fast, which is fasting for over 24 hours. And this is something that both of these have been studied in different ways. And so we'll try to touch on both of them. And we'll talk about fasting in general. I will say a lot of the research has been done in intermittent fasting, but we are seeing more, and there is research done as well on prolonged fasting. And we're going to focus in on gut health, and through this, the gut microbiome. So if this is your first time joining, or if I say gut microbiome and you're not really sure what I'm talking about, basically it's trillions of microbiota, like bacteria, viruses, fungi. They're residing in the digestive tract, primarily in the large intestine, impacting digestion, the immune system, metabolism, brain health, heart, liver, body health. And so this is an important group to think about, and something I think we're seeing, at least in the last decade or so, growing in importance when we're thinking about health and different treatments of chronic conditions. And so we know that the gut microbiome is highly dynamic. Diet, we know, plays a huge role in the gut microbiome. It has a bigger role in impacting the gut microbiome than genetics. So this is something you can actively account for and change and improve gut health. And we know that fasting can significantly influence the composition and the function of the gut. So let's get into that so you can kind of understand where fasting plays a role and why this might be something to think about or understand and see if it incorporates into your life or your health journey. So fasting has been shown specifically within the gut microbiome to change both diversity and the composition of the gut. Okay, so it's going to promote microbial diversity. And we know that this differs between how it changes with different types of fasting. But as an overarching, you will see improvements in the diversity of the gut microbiome. And that's one of the biggest hallmarks for the health of the microbiome is the diversity of it. And we can see that during fasting, we can see shifts in the composition of the gut microbiome, increasing in the number of beneficial species that are there and reducing the potentially harmful species that exist within the gut. So we're increasing the diversity, but also within that, the composition is leaning more towards a beneficial composition.
Yeah, and that's like, just to put an emphasis on that, like our goal for microbiome health, broadly speaking, is to have diversity of the different types of bugs that are within the gut, and then enough of the good ones. And so it's pretty clear in the data that the doing that is shifting the gut in a positive direction, more towards health. And as a part of fasting, it appears that the bugs that are growing in diversity or number are actually the beneficial ones, and we're crowding out and eliminating some of the potentially harmful or dysbiotic or inflammation producing bugs. And that's another thing that I found to be really interesting. I don't know if you've covered everything you wanted on diversity, but that by actually fasting, you're creating metabolic shifts that actually increase the short chain fatty acid production. And those are really important, such as like butyrate, acetate, propionate. And those are really important for the gut lining and healing the gut lining, modulating inflammation. And that has an effect directly within the gut, but also outside of the gut microbiome as well. And there's certain bacteria that are responsible for increasing or producing short chain fatty acids just in general. And that's, I think, a really exciting part of this, because inflammation is really at the heart of all disease and inflammatory processes. And if you are able to increase short chain fatty acid production, you're able to also heal the lining of the gut. And by healing the lining of the gut, you're going to reduce the inflammatory load on the body in general. And there's a lot of downstream benefits, which we can get into.
Yeah. And I think we can break those things down. So I think we can kind of get into why this is so key. So I think one of the big ones is the gut barrier function. And you'll see if you look up any review papers or Google fasting in the gut microbiome, one of the things that has been a focus on understanding kind of improving the health of the gut microbiome in terms of fasting and diet in general is improving the function of the gut barrier. And you'll hear a lot, this is referred to as like leaky gut. And so basically it's just things that shouldn't leave the gut easily getting out, and that's going to impact your overall health. And we know that fasting seems to enhance the gut barrier and reducing intestinal permeability, which is basically like things getting out that should stay in. And by improving this kind of structure of the gut barrier, we can then limit the amount of inflammation from harmful substance leaving the gut and getting into the bloodstream and impacting other organs. Really, you can think about this as any organ. If an organ has stuff inside that's not just coming out, you want it to stay inside. Right. And it's interesting to me that while we're improving overall gut health with fasting, we're also improving the ability of the gut structurally to do its job. And I think that speaks volumes as to why this may be something to kind of get a better understanding of, because leaky gut is something we hear tied to a lot of chronic conditions. And it's part of gut dysbiosis, right? So like as the gut reduces its ability to function properly, it has larger and larger impacts outside the gut itself.
Right. And I think two areas that are interesting, and we can cover them on future episodes. But one is the role of how a leaky gut actually creates food allergies and other allergies in general, because you have these proteins from food that are not fully digested leaking through the gut membrane and into the body, and the body's creating an immune response to them, and that immune response leads to symptoms, brain fog, fatigue, headaches, etc. So that's one angle, and I think that's a very important piece. If you can limit the permeability, you can limit the body's response. And then the other piece that I found really recently, I was just going down a rabbit hole, but fatty liver disease is increasing significantly in the amount of people that are dealing with this. Even kids are now being diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This didn't exist many years ago. And a part of this is metabolic, a part of this is diet. There's a lot of potential factors. But another one is that we're seeing an increase in the amount of toxins that are being shunted from the digestive tract via the portal vein to the liver. And so the liver is becoming more toxic with the metabolites from the microbiome and digestion. And that is in part due to leaky gut. And so by healing leaky gut, we can actually, reduce the amount of these metabolites that are going via the portal vein to the liver, and reducing the overall load on the liver, and thereby, hopefully, reducing this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So very fascinating. Something I think we should definitely cover on a future episode, like what is fatty liver? What is non-alcoholic fatty liver? What are the contributors? And of course, fasting is one of these roles where you reduce the body's overall burden, right? Because you're not ingesting food. And so there's nothing for the body to be breaking down. There's nothing to be actively metabolizing from food. And that can just give the whole system a break and an opportunity to reset, as we've already discussed, when it comes to the diversity, when it comes to the short chain fatty acids that are produced, and more.
And I feel like understanding, like, one of the things we try to talk about here as much as possible are things that you can actively account for in your life. So we do talk about diet, we talk about sleep, and we talk about the impacts of how all of these things like physical exercise and stuff have on health in terms of gut health, because we do try our hardest to focus on the gut health. We wander, but we try to stay there. But the idea here is thinking about things you actively have the ability to change. And fasting is one of those things. And it's the concept of fasting within modern science and health has been around for a good period of time. And the fact that we're still talking about intermittent fasting, and we were talking about it 15, 20 years ago, and it hasn't turned into the worst thing ever, is probably a good indicator that across different fields of science that we're seeing positive things. And for me, of course, being a brain person, I first heard about intermittent fasting. I won't say how long ago. It was a bit, but it was having people come in that was looking at longevity and overall brain health, and talking about intermittent fasting in terms of improving basically the structure and function of the brain. And part of that was talking about inflammation and reducing brain fog. And now coming from the other side in terms of gut health, because one of the cool things about the gut is it's so intertwined with the brain, but impacting the gut through fasting impacts the gut-brain axis. And one of the big things there is mental clarity. And that comes again from short-chain fatty acids being kind of heightened in their production. This also then leads to anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective effects in the brain. And so can you imagine improving brain health and gut health at the same time doing one thing? And I think that's one of the kind of cool things, is that this is impacting the gut is like the first domino in a chain, and that can be both positive and negative. And we try to stick on giving you the good things to do, and not just a podcast and a video about how to destroy your gut. That would be kind of counterintuitive, but it's good to think about that, you can make larger impacts by making a singular change. And again, in tying to this, reduced inflammation is a really big thing here with improving the gut, and fasting has been shown to decrease inflammation markers. reduce the number of pro-inflammatory species within the gut. One of these days, I'm going to be able to do this whole thing without talking over my tongue. But in all of this, reducing inflammation and reducing the number of pro-inflammatory species in the gut is beneficial, and it's going to reduce the risk of seeing chronic disease, but also can improve the inflammation that is heightened in some of these chronic conditions, right? So we know that, better gut health and intermittent fasting, or fasting in general, has been tied to reduced risk of things like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, improvements in autoimmune conditions, as well as gut-based conditions like IBS and IBD. All of these are tied to gut health, but as well have been shown to kind of reduce risk or improve symptoms with fasting. And a lot of that is tied to this reduced inflammation.
Yeah, and I always love coming up with like analogies or correlations. And I think one of them that's really relevant here is just sleep to the brain, right? Like, if you've ever had a few nights of bad sleep and you feel how, crappy you are after a few days, whether it's your energy or your mood or your just overall feeling. And that's what sleep's all about. Like, the sleep is an opportunity for the brain to go in and clean things up. And that can't happen while you're awake. And that's a big function of sleep. And that's the same in the gut. When you're going on a fast, whether it's intermittent, shorter one, or it's a longer one, it's this opportunity for the body to actually clean up, because there's not an active job to be done because there's no food to digest. And so the body's actually cleaning things up. It's going into what's called like autophagy. And so it's going in and it's cleaning things up that it would have otherwise like put on the to-do later list, right? Now it's like actively going in and doing the cleaning that it didn't have the time to do previously. And so, with that, we're seeing, like, as an example, Akkermansia is a wonderful bacteria that plays a real role in, again, gut integrity, gut lining. But that is something that's increasing. And very interestingly, it appears that it's increasing more dramatically during a prolonged water fast compared to intermittent fasting. Now, I'm generally a fan of doing things that are more sustainable. And so for the average person, intermittent fasting is much more sustainable than water fasting. As I mentioned previously, I'm, I don't know what hour, I'm probably hour 65 in my 72-hour fast. And this is something that I like to do just personally, to stretch myself, to, challenge myself mentally, but also to get all of these health benefits from fasting, whether it be, losing some weight, increasing these anti-inflammatory compounds within the gut, changing gut diversity, and just the mental clarity that can come along with it. So for those reasons, I'm a fan of it. But generally, I think for the average person, especially if you're a doctor and you're advising fasting to patients, I think something that's more sustainable, especially for someone who's dealing with chronic illness, is going to be intermittent fasting. Although I know of people who lead patients through like a 21-day water fast for really serious chronic diseases. Now, that does generally require a lot of medical oversight, making sure they're not going to die on you. So that is something to factor in. But in the context of FMT, I mean, fecal microbiota transplants, obviously that's what we're in the business of. And we've treated hundreds of patients over several years using FMT. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We're trying to do all of these things in a long-term period that we're getting from fasting, whether it's increasing diversity, whether it's healing the gut lining, whether it's increasing short-chain fatty acids and all the anti-inflammatory benefits from it. And so that's ultimately the goal. The challenge for people that are really ill and have had a lot of gut damaging things happen to them, whether it's antibiotics or long-term poor diets or other, there's a multitude of other things which we've all discussed here. But ultimately, in all of those cases, that's what we're trying to do with FMT. In the case where fasting won't cut it for that type of a patient, it's because their microbiome is so damaged that even things like fasting and probiotics and dietary changes just don't work. And we need a sort of bigger hammer, so to speak, which is where FMT can come in. But even in the context of FMT, a part of our prep when we were treating adult patients was doing a 24 to 48 hour fast in advance of starting the FMT for some of these same reasons, to get this boost, to create a diversity change in the gut, to be more accepting of the fecal transplant that was to follow. And so that was a part of what we did. We'd have a pre-treatment that typically included some antibiotics, antifungals. We'd have a bowel cleanse to just try to clean out all of the stuff that's in the gut, removing the fecal stool, the impaction in some cases, and then following that with a 24 to 48 hour water fast. In some cases, that wasn't possible, but in general, that was the suggestion. And that was a part of the thinking here. We're really prepping the gut to be ready to accept the transplant and allow more of these bugs that we're attempting to transplant to take hold and graft and continue the positive benefits that we're seeking. And so that's just another context where fasting can be applied in advance of FMT.
Yeah. And if the concept of FMT interests you and you are a medical professional, please reach out. We are a contract manufacturer of FMT, and so we have a depth of experience treating patients. In a previous life, we've moved into kind of trying to support doctors through how to apply FMT and providing high quality product. And so if that's something that interests you, and knowing that, part of the long-term benefits of FMT are understanding diet and how to best improve gut health. And that's one of the reasons that we try to talk about kind of all aspects of gut health and what role the gut plays in overall health, because even in cases where fasting isn't the right answer right now, there's something more dramatic like FMT needs to be done, understanding the role diet plays and fasting plays in terms of prolonging the benefits and ensuring that gut microbiome stays engrafted and becomes kind of what their gut looks like going forward. These are all things to think about too in the post FMT kind of land. So one of the things I think that's key is always do your own research and kind of try to understand like what fasting is, how does it fit? And our goal here is to highlight what the research is saying in terms of gut health and fasting. And one of the big things is understanding what it will look like in your context, ensuring that you start gradually. Don't jump into a 72-hour fast. I think I would turn to dust. But it's understanding what fasting looks like for you and how you can integrate it in, and if it will be a benefit. And always talk to, your healthcare provider before kind of making any drastic changes. But understanding that when fasting, hydration and electrolytes are very important. You still have to stay hydrated, which is why when you do kind of these prolonged fasts, there's always some element in terms of water or bone broth or electrolytes within that context. And always listen to your own body and listen to your healthcare providers, because that feels weird. Your gut feeling, which I now always find funny to say in this context, but your body will tell you when something is wrong. And if you're making a change and your gut is telling you, maybe this isn't for us, it's best to stop, rethink, and understand. And then when you're coming out of a fast, or just in general in your life, concentrating on diet, concentrating on the things you put into your body. That is the fuel. That is what makes everything go round inside your body. And when you're
refeeding, refeeding, they call it.
Refeeding, yeah. So post fast, understanding that the gut microbiome is now primed to do the best it can do. We're talking about increasing in composition and diversity and those kinds of things, and reducing pro-inflammatory. Your gut is going, all right, let's do this. Let's be the best gut ever. So you then have to be conscious of the food that you're going to give it coming out of that, because it is primed to do these things, but you can very quickly get rid of those benefits. As soon as they can come in, you can get rid of them, prioritizing things like fiber, prebiotic-based foods, fermented foods, vegetables, leafy greens, eating whole foods, and avoiding, and we probably say this too often, but it is really something to be aware of. And when we say avoid, we don't assume that no one is ever going to eat processed foods or things with high sugar. And then that is not the reality of the current way that our world works. But being aware and avoiding processed foods and high sugar foods, these are unhealthy foods. They are not feeding your gut the way your gut wants to be fed. And especially first when you're coming off a fast, you could switch those benefits into a negative context very quickly, leading to dysbiosis or undoing any of the benefits you did. And talking with someone currently who's coming off a 72-hour fast, you would be very upset if you sat down and ate something and everything you just gained in those 72 hours went away.
Right. And I think, mentally there's an inclination to go like, starving or fasting has been a part of lifestyle for, thousands of years as we've existed, right? Not typically by choice, but just as a nature of you had to go out and find your own food. And so the inclination mentally is to go after foods that are going to be higher in calorie. And so, sure, mentally, I'd love to go and eat, a bunch of carbohydrates and stuff myself with sugary foods because that just sounds really good. But it is really important to not do that and to rebuild the refeeding phase, be something that can support this new gut diversity that you're trying to rebuild. And so my goal is to not do that. I already have plans for my eating tonight, which I think will be really good. And over the next days, I'm going to be really focusing on that refeeding portion of this, post-fast phase. And I hope to continue to maintain some of the benefits that I already feel while doing the fast. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that shifted my thinking in terms of diet for the gut has always been that the food you eat determines the bacteria in your gut, and that can lead to food cravings. So if you're eating food that you're like, this probably isn't great for me, but you actually could be causing a cycle where then you're going to crave it more. And getting past food cravings and switching your diet is a very difficult thing to do. But understanding how important it is and the big roles that it plays. And please check out our other videos on diet as we kind of clue up here. But it is important to understand the role that the diet can play and how big of an impact making those choices can have on your gut health. And while this is very interesting, I think this will be probably a topic we come back to. I think in a couple of years, we're going to see more information and understanding how diet and fasting can play a role in gut health. And hopefully by then, we'll kind of understand the differences of fasting and what each of those will do. And maybe the reality is that intermittent fasting is a good long-term strategy, but maybe there will be a time where we understand that these prolonged fasts might be good X number of times a year to get these certain benefits that are kind of boosted past what you see in an intermittent condition. But I hope you found this interesting. I always find the things that we can make a choice and make huge changes really interesting because it's kind of, I don't know, personally for me, kind of empowering that you can change your health by making a choice like this. And I wish Jason the best meal this evening. And I'm excited to hear, maybe that's something we can touch on our next recording, but just how, those 2 weeks since your fast, how you're feeling. And again, if you have questions, please leave them below. If you have a suggestion of a topic you would like to hear about. And if you're thinking about adding a fast into your life, read up on it, talk to your doctor, and ensure that that's kind of the best fit for you. But as we've covered here, there are definite benefits for gut and overall health. And thank you for joining us. And we hope you join us next time.